There's a lot of information today, but we're hoping that people can follow along.
Yes.
And I mean, honestly, it's like the whole goal is that by the end of the 5 days, you have a VA hired. And so that's our goal. You know, your goal might be by the end of this month to have them hired. So you can go at your own pace, but we want to be able to give you that information so that by the end of the week, you have all of the tools that you need. So we were like, okay, how do we do this now? Go faster. Yeah. Okay.
I hadn't decided yet. I could start any time, I guess, because I have stuff that I'm behind on. So I could, if I find the right person, I could start right away, or I could delay for a little while longer. It's not going to hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like we have people like that. And then we have people that are like, we need to have this person hired immediately, right? Like we've been putting this off for a long time. And now, you know, it's like, if we put this off any longer, you know, it's
going to get worse.
Yeah, exactly. And so we wanted to be able to like appeal to that as well and be as helpful as we can. And so, we've kind of now, because we've doubled up today, we have now established more time on Friday to go over the hiring, like the onboarding process a little bit, which is kind of what we discussed yesterday. So that's almost like actually a sister course that we've been developing. So we'll kind of go over a little bit more of it than we anticipated because of the ability to double up today.
Yes, I'm looking. The spreadsheet just came in.
Oh, good.
So I can see a bigger version of it. I saw enough of it on my phone, but it's better to see it larger like this.
Yeah, it's a pretty lengthy spreadsheet. And so it's probably better to have it on a computer so that you're not like just looking at a bunch of check boxes. So we recommend that you do save that on your own drive, and then you'll be able to actually check box where it says my needs. You can check off actually what you had as your preferences.
Okay.
Yeah, so we don't have anybody right now. So we'll
like
just.
Megan's trying.
Yeah.
I see your name. Oh, she doesn't have her video started. Well, hi, Megan.
What are you doing?
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Yeah.
Getting excited. I got to get up early and drive to Danville tomorrow.
Oh, wow. That's a long trek for you.
Yeah, I'm going to give them $1,000. So they earned it.
There you go.
People here said you can just give me the $1,000. You don't have to drive anywhere. And they'd even buy me a cup of coffee.
There you go. That works too.
Okay. All right. So since it's just the three of us right now, we'll just go ahead and hop on and then just answer any questions that you have. I know that you're just now opening the Excel sheet, but we can kind of go into that a little bit and explain that as much as you need. Megan, are you going to video at any point today?
Yeah. I'm trying to
I just wanted to make sure that you were.
I'm here. Oh, wait. Now I'm here.
She exists. Excellent.
I need to find a place with better lighting.
Thingy covered, sorry.
I found a place today that has a little better lighting than yesterday, but it's still not the best lighting in the world. But at least I don't look completely dark like I did yesterday and the day before. So, I didn't have any questions on the spreadsheet. It wasn't a surprise, I guess, because I had already been out and found FreeUp and Task Bullet.
Oh, okay, great.
Those were the top two. And as I went down my list of stuff from yesterday, on what I was wanting, my budget and the pay and stuff like that, those two still hit it. I didn't look too hard at the ones that were further to the right because I was starting to see some boxes that were unchecked that I wanted. So
perfect.
I think I've narrowed it down to two already. The Upwork was the one I needed to see more of because I had to keep scrolling my phone to see it. But now that I can see it in the spreadsheet, because there might have been some stuff there that I wanted.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's great that you. I think I tried to emphasize, and I didn't know if it came across, that the more boxes that are checked are not always the better company to go with, because really you want it to just be the boxes that are checked that meet your needs. So if you found two that meet your needs, I think that it would be great to start the inquiry process today for those two companies.
Okay.
And that's what is on. Have you looked at the packet?
The packet, it just had the list my top three companies and had the inquiry prep.
Yep. All right. Perfect. All right. So I would actually start with the inquiry prep. And then answer as many of those questions as you can. And it's actually something that you've probably seen and free up a few of those questions.
Mhm.
And what we did was we had you answer them before you actually submit the inquiry. So that way you're not sitting on the inquiry page trying to like now last minute figure out what exactly you need from that virtual assistant, from that task.
Mhm.
And we've tried to, you don't need to fill out all of the questions because some of them are relevant more to the task for one specific task. And some of them are more relevant for having a virtual assistant that is a reoccurring virtual assistant that works with you on a weekly basis, right? Which is more, I think, what you're thinking of is having one virtual assistant do many things.
Yes, because I had checked the 5 hours a week, ongoing general tasks, English as the native language, $15 an hour. What else did I mark? So my monthly budget, 300 to 500 a month. So yeah, so as I'm trying to figure out, I'm looking at what day was this? Day 2 questionnaire you had us fill out.
Yeah.
It's very similar to the stuff you had here on the prep. And so I'm looking for differences right now. So
yeah, and that's something like we also say, like, keep that handy because that's going to be used in the inquiry process, the hiring process, and the onboarding process because it's showing you what you actually need from them. And especially for the interview process, you're going to make sure that the candidate they send you actually aligns with it. Because even though you went with the company and you've even told them your preferences, you might still have to vet that candidate with those preferences. And so, yeah, with the inquiry prep, what the difference is definitely is that it's going to be more in depth with the task itself. So the task you're going to be having them do and breaking it into steps if you'd like to do that because it's easier to convey it to the company so they know exactly who would be good for that role. A lot of times with different companies, they'll have somebody that specializes in something even if they're a general VA, if that makes sense.
It does. So questions. I finally read enough that I have questions now. So I got all the way down to the bullet on communications. And so I have questions about communications. So this was my envisionment. So I don't know if this is going to work or not. I don't know if I'm comfortable or not of them having direct access to my own email, but I can forward emails to them for processing. So I would provide the email server and the email address, if that is all right. I don't know what the companies would restrict them on doing, though. And also, as far as telephone calls, because I would expect them to make some calls for me, I would rather have them use my Vonage soft phone. So it's my phone number with my caller ID.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they're allowed to use, because that's a plugin they would have to put in their browser on their system to do
I think you should outline all of those and then literally include it in the inquiry because it might depend on that company, but I don't see that as being, I see that as being like, I need you to have these tools and it not be a big deal, but it does depend on the company. Like for FreeUp, for example, they'll give you an employee that's not even like a free, like it's not an agency that has a bunch of employees. They actually just have like independent contractors. Right. So that independent contractor isn't regulated by the company. So that might make that a better option.
That made me, I want to go with them, right? Because I think about branding and stuff like that is I would want the caller ID to be, from our area code with our name in the caller ID. When they're calling, they can identify themselves and so on. And the same with the emails. Rather than having it come from me, I would want the person they're responding to know that somebody who's responding on my behalf.
Right. And I think that's
you see what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Something that I would note there is that in the interview process, then I would establish that you want to do a video interview or a phone interview because oftentimes an email interview is the option or even the default. And so if you want somebody to be handling calls on your behalf, you want to make sure that they're able to represent themselves pretty well and be a very fluent, if not native English speaker.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I think that would be something that you would want to establish in your inquiry prep as well.
And let me ask you some questions about task turnaround time. If I'm engaging in a ongoing 5 hours a week, they would probably be communicating per task what I expect the turnaround to be, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's a lot of times with the, like when you break down your tasks, you're going to have deadlines and a timeline built in. But also I think with that, and we kind of get into this on the onboarding behalf as well, but just knowing when you want the turnaround time for each week for each task or each like part of the task. So it's not just like, I want to have emails answered on a weekly basis, but I want to have the inbox checked, like, and thoroughly checked by the end of each day. If that makes sense. We got one.
Yes, it does.
So like each of those tasks should have its own timetable built in, but also the main task should have that in as well.
Okay.
Jason, did you get a haircut? Did you get a haircut? You look like you got a haircut.
Couple of them, yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
So we were just talking about the turnaround time for the tasks, which is on page 2 of today's packet when you're talking about the inquiry prep. And if you see, there's a little name here. Tyler is kind of actually doing a lot of our tech stuff. So he's been helping us on the back end. So he's just joining us. And he actually works, so Glenn works in, he works at State Farm. And so he's like got sensitive information. Tyler actually works for healthcare system, and he works all virtually as well and does a lot of that. So that was interesting there. So if you see the name, it's not just somebody creeping on our call.
Yeah.
Happy to be here, guys.
All right, Glenn, do you have any other questions?
I'm looking. I don't think so. I didn't get a chance to watch the video for today.
Okay, yeah. So that
I was a
one's
little backed up, so I don't know what was in it.
cool. It's mostly an overview of this, and then understanding what how you're going to be utilizing the preferences for the companies, but mostly it's about the next steps is arranging the inquiry. And then by the end of today, you should be actually sending the inquiries out, because we've noticed that the turnaround time for companies is about 24 hours. So we don't recommend that you commit to a package yet or commit to hiring someone yet until you actually submit the inquiry and they send you some options. That seems to be like the best way to find somebody that fits your needs, obviously. And so we recommend doing the inquiry today, and that's why we kind of accelerated the process. And so that by tomorrow, you'll actually be starting the interview process.
Okay. It looks like I have enough information to do that, so I think I'm good, because I've been diligently filling my stuff out, so I just got to get it into the right format of what the companies are going to expect.
Do you feel like this has prepared you for the inquiry doing the last 2 days?
I think so, because I had lots of questions because it was the subtleties, because you can read stuff and not get the process. You have to ask and get some clarifying questions in.
Yeah, that's why we went with the daily calls too. It's like we want you to not be like stopping on something, waiting for information, and then you are like backed up 3 days, or whatever.
Okay. So here's I guess it's an opinion question. So if I'm preferencing like free up so that I get an independent contractor, and I go for the 5 hours a week, what is the general feeling being a VA yourself? You have how many 5 hours a week jobs do you take on at any given time? And would you want to get rid of a 5 hour a week job if you've got somebody who wants to keep you busy for 25 or 30 hours a week, where it's closer to full time?
Yeah, I think it's more personal. For me personally, I've done more full-time VA work, and then I've actually preferred doing smaller hourly work because I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket. And so if that one client drops me, I'm not like, oh gosh, now I have no work at all. But also I really like staying busy with different things. Like I like the like having my hands in this basket of like emails, and then when I'm tired of that, or when I'm finished that project, I'm like, oh boom, now I can focus on somebody that does fashion design, and I'm like in like different worlds, which is really fun. So I like doing that. I prefer to keep it 5 to 8 hours per week per client, except for maybe my main client, which I'll do like 5 to 20, depending on if it's launch week or something. And so you will keep in mind that most of those people, if they don't have other clients, it's just supplemental income while they're like taking care of their kids. Or, like a lot of stay-at-home moms will have a 5 to 10 hour a week VA job or something like that, a student maybe. So like you aren't their main thing if you are doing the 5 hours a week, right? Obviously, but you, there's pros and cons to it, but I think that it's not not a big deal.
Well, that's what I was wondering. It's kind of anticipating that if I go through all this, I get somebody and I'm happy after 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and then they get a bigger chunk of work from somebody else that's ongoing, then you get dropped and you're back to square one and you start over.
I mean, that's
I was
always
just trying
the
to
risk.
see.
It really is.
I could go towards an agency instead. So
It is, yeah. I mean,
I don't know.
that is the risk that going with one person is a risky thing. But at the same time, like we said yesterday, they're more invested in your company a lot of times if it's, an independent contractor. But also, and I'll get into this on Friday too, I really, really want to emphasize that you should be creating processes for everything that you're giving them. And so they should be even creating processes for what they're taking off your plate. And so if you do have to fire them, or if they do quit and you're left without anything, you just have to start the hiring process over, but you don't have to necessarily start the retraining from scratch. You already know what projects they're working on, what steps. And we've kind of like given that to you so that you are able to like easily start over. Easier, I guess.
Hope not, but yes.
But yeah, it's not ideal, definitely. But yeah, you want to have the right tools. And then something that we kind of talked about at the beginning, Megan and I talked about, is that once you have the tools in your tool belt to hire one VA, you'll have the tools to hire more. And then also you'll have the tools to hire other people within your company. Like, this is just the beginning, but once you're familiar with this process, it makes the rest of it really much easier.
Okay. That makes sense.
Jason, do you have anything? No? Okay.
Jason, no? Okay.
No, I'm behind, so I'm playing catch up.
He was like, when do we start the action? And then he's like, I'm behind. I can't start the action yet.
Well, I've needed this for a long time, so I'm gung ho on this.
Yeah.
And we're getting into my busy season, as I call it. So May, June, July is just absolutely crazy for me. So I need to get something going here real quick.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that if you can hire someone now, I would start with one task to see how they're working with you, like immediately from the get-go. Start with one task so that you know that they're like good with your communication style, your turnaround time. Make sure that if it's busy season, right when you introduce the first task, you make them have active deadlines. Like, you act like it's busy season, even if it's not, so that they're onboarded with that sense of urgency that you're going to eventually, a need within your assistant.
Okay. And when I'm filling out these forms, or whatever you called, I forgot what you called it already, for the companies.
Yeah,
there's certain skills that I'm looking for, like to start with. Some of these starter skills, like Constant Contact, Sign Up Genius, stuff like that. I need to be able to list those, right? To find out if you have people who are experienced in those.
Well, and not only, it depends how flexible you want to be with that, but if they're able to learn it quickly, that's okay too. If they're familiar with softwares that are similar, and that's okay. But if you list them, or if you're really clear about what you need them to, the more clear, the better, really. Because if they have somebody on the back burner that's like, oh, dude, I'm really familiar with all those things, obviously you want them to be your hire. But yes, the more clear, the better for them, but also for you. So that when you're starting to onboard them, you're like, oh, I noticed, or we mentioned this in the hiring process. I know that you're familiar with this. I know that you're familiar with this. I know that you have to be trained on this one. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, okay. Because I could see that as my first tasks, is I have lots of distribution lists that need to be updated from Excel spreadsheets. So I would want them to know Excel. Constant Contact is new to me. I opened my account about 3 months ago. I haven't done anything with it, but I need to take and move all my contacts into there so I can start communicating through Constant Contact instead of directly from my email address.
Yeah.
Because I miss a lot of stuff when I do that.
It might be interesting to even, so we always recommend doing a practice project. It's something that we kind of recommend, not for everybody, but I think that it really helps you understand how they work. But that might be a good practice project, is for them to teach you Constant Contact while they're like using it. So you might even have them like, well, I would set very specific parameters so they're not like watching 14 hours of tutorials, but you might say spend 2 hours getting really familiar with Constant Contact and then record an SOP or a process that I can follow along with. Do you know what I mean? And so that's a really good practice project for them to have multiple things that they take on. Yeah. And then you can see how you can build from that. But if there's a project where there's multiple facets, I think that's a really good practice one.
Okay. This might be because it will involve a bunch of different things.
Mm-hmm.
So that would let me find out how technically competent they are in doing some of these tasks.
And
because
how
getting from Excel and
how well they explain things, what their communication style is, what their turnaround time is, like if you can trust them with calls, if you can trust them with doing this project. Like I think there's so many different variables within it that would make it the perfect practice project. Which is
okay.
part of our TM. We're like, what is the perfect practice project?
Well, that would help me out long term, just getting over here. And even if I don't keep a VA past the summer, at least getting a bunch of bulk stuff moved into Constant Contact will help me for years to come. So that's like a major hurdle that will save me time over and over and over again.
Exactly. And that's what I think that's what the golden, I don't know, gauntlet. I don't know. The golden thing that you're looking for is something that you can pass off at least easily is better, right? But if it's easily able to be explained, and it's a lot of an initial effort, but they're able to take long-term a ton of time off your plate because of reoccurring tasks, I think that's the best. You can find them for little tasks, but if it's evergreen, taking things off your plate, that's what you're looking for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And keeping it up to date too, because what I would do is provide them a data dump and say, here's the original source. 3 months down the road, go make the changes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
and
stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that you need to, in that point, and here I'm giving you all these tips that we'll be going over on Friday, but it's
all right. I jumped ahead. That's all right.
It's important to establish places where you'll be checking in. Okay. Within your timeline, you'll be saying, okay, and then I'll check in. If I'm having them do a task every 3 months, every month and a half, I'll have them check in and see what the progress is on that. Or every 3 months, I'll be checking in to make sure that they've completed that task. Or I'll have them send me a summary of how they completed that task every 3 months. So something that builds in check-ins so that you're not just okay, do the project, bye. And then 3 months later, you're wait, nothing got done, or you didn't do it correctly. That is the worst. So so we would rather you build a process for onboarding that's sustainable and that's recurring. Okay. So Megan, you had your finger up.
I was excuse me? So, we're talking about what skills and knowledge are necessary for some of the tasks or projects that you want to hand off. I think it's really important on that worksheet to sort of have I'm losing my train of thought, to have everything written down, Constant Contact, Excel, everything that they need to know or that they could be proficient in, and submit that, include it in with your inquiry before you interview with them. Because if you submit it, for example, I submitted an inquiry on FreeUp. And so I know you had talked about that one specifically, so that's why I'm using that example. So it has you list out what specific skills are needed, and then that way they can better match you with somebody based on that, and then you can go from there through interviewing them and seeing if that specific person is a good fit.
And also tomorrow, when we go into the interview process, we'll actually have a space, not to give too much away, but we'll have an area where you can write down the preferences for the tasks and then the preferences for the person. And so that way you're referencing that when you're interviewing them. And then you're also taking notes on that interview to see okay, this person didn't meet Constant Contact, but they did have knowledge about contact software. Or you can circle the main things that are a non-negotiable. And if you don't find anybody with the interview process, then you say, okay, I'm not going to go with these candidates because these are my 4 non-negotiables. And so we have an area for that within the interview process. But if you don't submit it in the inquiry, then they might just hand you a bunch of people that don't mean any of it. And now you're starting from scratch anyway. So.
Okay.
Cool. Hey, Jason. Okay. So where are you at? I know that you're behind, but is there any way that we can help you with where you're at to move forward? Because I know it can get overwhelming now that we're at day 3.
No, honestly, haven't been able to get to it. So that was actually, since you're asking that, that was going to be one of my suggestions, or I'm sure you've thought about this, but is there a specific reason why you don't allow us access to tomorrow's materials almost immediately following these calls?
Okay, that's a good question. So the honest answer is that we're making sure that we're building them as we already have everything built, but we're adapting them as we need to adapt them. And also because we have it at this pace so that people aren't getting ahead of themselves and trying to hire somebody without going through our steps. Because we've literally we've been working on this for months to make sure we know what the next step is. Right. And so tomorrow's video actually was recorded, but now we changed it because we combined the two today and yesterday. So now we're using day 5 for that one. And then, so we're changing those up as the beta course kind of expands. We think that eventually this is going to be an evergreen course where you can go at your own pace. But we also know that a lot of people have gone out of order in the past without the course, just on their own. They're just okay, I'm going to hire somebody. I don't need to identify the tasks that I need to hire for. I already know I've got 14 tasks. But if they don't actually figure out their top tasks, they end up overloading that assistant, or they don't find the right assistant because they haven't figured out what specific needs, what are non-negotiables, what specific needs they need, and then what preferences are for a VA and what website specifically. So all of this stuff.
Let me clarify. I get what you're saying there, but I guess what I'm asking is, for me, my schedule made it to where I could not do the things between 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock today.
Mm-hmm.
Literally couldn't do it because I was in lunch meetings.
Yeah.
So I guess what I was saying is there something you guys might want to consider for future in this course, where if we're finishing this at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock CST, you're sending our homework for tomorrow either shortly after this, to where people, if they've blocked this time and they have another hour to get into tomorrow's content, knowing they can't do it between 11 and 1 tomorrow, somewhere between these 24 hours, if people had that flexibility to be able to do the homework like I couldn't, then that might be something you want to consider, because I know you're doing this in a way that is facilitating those next steps, but I think having a little bit of flexibility for people that have schedules that they just
absolutely
might be something to consider.
And I think that's a really good piece of feedback. I think that eventually we're going to try to create this course so that it's a 2-day course, so that you have all of your getting clear in one day, and you can you can spread that into however many days you want, but it'll be all of that information to get clear, and then all of the information to take action to hire your VA. And so that's kind of what we're thinking is for busy people that need to go at their own pace, but are still needing to be walked through the process. We were thinking 2 days would be boom, here's half day of work, here's half day of work. And then it wouldn't have, daily calls, but it would maybe have the 2 days would have calls. We're just not sure what works best. And we don't plan on having a daily call for our next 5-day challenge, because we're planning on taking all of the questions and putting it in the information so that when you're reading through this, you're oh, this covers everything I needed to cover. That's ideal for us. And so we're trying to make it evergreen so that you can go at your own pace, but we just want to make sure that we have the steps very clear before we do that.
And I figured that was part of what's going on, is that you're building it. It's built, but you're building it as you go and flexing a little bit. So that's why I asked in the way that I did.
Yeah, no, I love that. And honestly, we've also talked about doing bonus Q&A calls if we find that people are not getting all of the information they need during that Q&A call. And they're I'm not able to do this information. But so far we haven't really heard that as a response, but we were okay, we could do a bonus Q&A call that day for later in the afternoon when people have done more of the work. And then, Glenn was we need the email earlier in the day. And we're all right, cool, we're on it. That's good feedback. We wanted this to be a 5-hour challenge for the busy people that are overwhelmed in their schedule. And so we're okay, if we can give you an hour to watch the video, complete the task, then do the Q&A call, and that's all in 1 hour every day, then that's for busy people. And so that's what we were thinking, but it makes sense to adapt to what people are actually asking for, which is what we're doing. We're trying. And if you saw, Jason, in today's email, I tell you what tomorrow you can expect for tomorrow and Friday.
I saw it.
Yep. Tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them.
I'm trying to do that. And then I also included catch up at the end so that you can go back. So we're adapting because this is beta. Even though she and I have been through this course over and over and over, and she is taking the course. But we also are adapting to what our actual target demographic is. Like, we are assistants, like we're not our target demographic. So we're just adapting, you know?
No, you guys are doing a great job. I'm just the kind of guy that thinks about things, so.
Yeah. And honestly, like, we are very understanding of that. And so we're trying to figure out what the best thing is for the majority, right? Like, we have 50 people enrolled and we've only got, 2 people hopping in on the calls. So we need to have feedback for like what else we need to provide and how we can get people more engaged. And so like, that's a big thing for us, is we're like, okay, are we sending out enough emails? Are we sending too many emails? Are we, so now like we're like getting into like the nitty gritty of the details of it. So feedback, appreciate it. All right. So, do you have any other questions before I hop into what you can expect for the next
Nope.
week?
I'm good. Nothing.
All right. So, okay, our intention was today to make you very comfortable in what VA company you're going to choose and in submitting the inquiry. Of course, if you have any questions, just literally email us. We are happy to answer those questions as you start getting them, and then we can include them also into tomorrow's Q&A call. And so next up, tomorrow, we're going to have you get really clear about what you need from the candidate, and actually with the tasks that you have. So as we've kind of discussed, have you prepare for the interview, and then we're actually going to have you interviewing your candidates. So like, we're really jumping in now. Like, you're submitting the inquiry today. Tomorrow, you're actually doing the interviewing process. And then on Friday, we're going to have you craft your hiring email and hire your candidate. And then we'll have you be really clear about how you're going to onboard your new hire. So it can be a really easy, flawless, simple process, hopefully. And then we're going to have you start the onboarding process, and we'll give you some tips for ongoing success with your virtual assistant, and also teach you some next steps. So it's going to be really full, and it'll be really exciting. And like I said, you can go at your own pace, but if you want to pace it with us, we have made it so that you can follow along really easily with the process. Are you guys sick of hearing the word process yet? Because I'm kind of sick of saying it.
All right.
Very relevant.
Never.
Cool. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. And
Yeah.
as always, let us know if you have any questions, and we'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.